So to this evening, my name is John Oliver, Ward 1 Counselor. I am joined, according to just the order on my screen, Counselors Alan Lobovitz, David Mickley, Josh Krinsman, Martha Bixby, and we have several members of the community here. Welcome, everyone. I don't know if we're intending to take public comment tonight. But I will kind of walk us through at least what I'm hoping to cover tonight. Let's see if I can share my screen gracefully here. I think this is the one I gotta do. Did that work? Looks like it. Nope, you don't want that. Or do you? Yeah, this is the one we want, right? You can see the planning session screen.
Yeah, we got your whole, looks to me like a PowerPoint, but I think it's some other program you're using. We can see the slides on the side and the main slide in the middle.
Yep, great. So yeah, that is. But
now it's gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is Google Slides. What did I do? Did I
This
get
is just me. Don't let me speak to the team about it. Okay, we can see it
You're
now.
back. You're back.
All right. So I'm not
We're
going to
back.
touch anything. I can do this and it changes, right?
Correct.
Changes.
So I think we all know that the city has just gone through a fairly tumultuous time with this public schools, school teachers on strike. And what many of us on the city council, including myself and everyone here, is very interested in not only understanding kind of how the community is reacting to this, although a lot of us heard a lot of different commentary, but we need to be able to be forward-looking here. We need to figure out what the residual impact to our community is, and perhaps most importantly, how are we going to bring ourselves back together and make this system work, perhaps in a way that is better than it's ever worked in the past, or at least ideally. As such, wanted to start tonight in starting to assemble a look at how I hope we can go through this. Everything I'm about to share, by the way, for members of the committee, consider it a complete draft form. I've cobbled together some things that I do in my day job to kind of help us kind of at least think through a structure, and then we'll take it from there. We can beat that up and add or delete as we collectively see fit. But in terms of tonight, I wanted to just kind of touch on our mission, the objectives for this group or this committee. What is our planned approach here? And then talk through next steps. So fairly simple and straightforward. And our mission, our goal, if you will, was established by Mark Laredo and David Kalis. A few of us kind of contributed some nif-nods to it, but basically, we're charged with developing a set of specific recommendations as to how the city council can help our community better understand not only city finances, in my opinion, but how things work in and around city finances, how we can work with other city leaders and engage in efforts to create a greater sense of trust and civility in the city. I think for anyone who was watching the conversations unfold, Facebook, Instagram, even in the media, there were a lot of emotionally charged thoughts being shared. And I personally feel that a lot of folks were talking past each other. But at this point, really what I want to focus on, or what we need to focus on, is what are we going to do moving forward? How are we going to pull ourselves together, not only in support of each other, but our students, our teachers, and NPS in general. I've kind of drafted a few objectives that kind of fold into that mission statement. And again, this is a draft. I created these from the, with myself, by myself, and I'm looking forward to kind of talking these through and adding again, deleting and editing. But really, I think we really need to focus on, as a group, what we believe the city council can and should be taking action on. You know, of all the input we're about to gather and all the conversations we're about to have, what is it that we as a city council can and should be doing moving forward? As I just mentioned, right, we're going to gather a broad sense of input from all of the voices across our community. I want the large voices, I want the small voices, I want us to hear from everyone. I'm seeing a couple of nods here, so hopefully, you know, David nodding there, he's deep in thought. This is great, good. And because we're going to be getting a lot of input that may or may not be in the sweet spot for the city council to take action on, we're going to want to bring together all the leaders from across the city to help parse out all of the to-dos, right? Whether that's NPS, the school committee, you know, the mayor's office, the administration, other groups throughout the city. We've already had a few offers from several groups to help, you know, deliver on the mission, right? So I think we're going to need to take advantage of that. And I'm going to pause there because I'm saying a lot of stuff. Anybody else, any comments so far? From within the committee, that is? Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
I mean, it's a small comment. Well, two comments. One is I think the input should come first. It's just in order of the three bullets. The mission is, what can the city council do? So you're talking about asking other city leaders to sort of help our effort. So we have to think about the difference. You know, is it something we can do? And those are two separate things that we can do, and I think that's the mission. And we can suggest to others what they might do to help. So I just wanted to. So I guess using the term partners is fine. But the mission is really focused on what we can do.
That's correct.
I think we should focus on that.
Yeah, and
we could have suggestions for other leaders as to how they can help. But that's. Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
Enough said.
Yep. Okay. Josh.
Thank you. You know, the one thing I think you laid it out beautifully. I agree with everything you said. I think you said it well. I think there's sort of another component of this, which is that we saw as sort of a silver lining, we saw during the course of the strike and all the tumult, interest in the city's finances. And that tends to wane very quickly. And so I think a component of this is that we need to try and find a way to sort of keep that interest alive as much as possible, because people have a tendency to, you know, regress and say, okay, you know, now someone else has got it taken care of, that problem's not there anymore. So although we can help people better understand our city finances, I think we also want to keep them engaged and keep them interested in things like the city finances and the work of the city council, the work of the city. So I may be wrong, but I feel like, you know, it's sort of part of our charge.
Yep. Yep. I like it. I like it a lot. That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think that, you know, to your point, while we may start, for lack of a better term right now, behaving differently, doing different things moving forward as a council, I think it's going to be important that we're paying attention to not only the level of engagement, but what else should and could we be doing over time, not only ourselves, but like Alan just mentioned, one of the things that I really like that President Laredo and Vice President Kalis have already started to do is to kind of create a different cadence, if you will, of communications, official communications and meetings with the school committee and NPS in general. I think that's going to be important. And bringing those, bringing that, putting some more structure to the partnership might be one way to look at it. And that'll kind of evolve over time, I guess, is where I'm going with that. At least that's how I see it. Are there any other hands out there? I don't see any others right now. None. Okay, thank you. So then, all right, and here's where the consultant in me starts to nerd out a little bit. So my apologies in advance. So I tend to work with my clients. I'm really going to have to apologize, and I'm going to move on. But I think it's really important for us to clearly define the actual problem or problems that we're looking to solve before we get into what I'm going to call the solution space. So if we think about these first two steps, right? And I kind of draw all these slides will be available for everybody. So this is kind of the construct that we're working with here. It's kind of like we need to design the right thing and then design the thing right. So in the two steps, it's define the problems and then define the solutions. Yeah, I apologize, Josh. I know. So we're at step one right now, which is exploring the problem. We need to get as many voices from across the city to talk to us about, what information were they receiving? What information were they missing? What information, we'll bring to the table. We as a city council will put the filter on it eventually to say, and here are the things that the city council, amongst those, let's say we get 6 great ideas, right? 6 really important initiatives. We might look at it and say, you know what, these 2 or 3 are for the city council to handle. This one's for the mayor's office. These 2 are NPS. Whatever that starts to look like, we need to understand, I think, the full scope of the challenges that parents, teachers, residents were bumping into. What were their experiences? I think it's really important that we also try and keep in mind that as we gather this input, we don't want to get into a situation where we're getting finger pointing. That's not going to help us move forward here. We need to understand what people were experiencing so that we can understand our role in plugging some of the information gaps, helping people understand how things are working. That's what I mean when I was saying earlier, the process, in addition to the actual city finances, right, that are called out in the mission statement. And then, once we've kind of gathered that input in step 1, step 2, we have to come together as a group, sort it all out, synthesize, right, bring all the like ideas together, create that list of 6, 10, 15, whatever, recommendations or things that we think can or should be done. And then we need to parse them out, like I was just saying, which are the things that are probably in the wheelhouse of the city council, which should be, brought to NPS or other groups throughout the city. We need to create some sense of a prioritization. And then we need to make sure, and Alan, this is what I was talking about before, we need to share the input in a way that other leaders within Newton can act on them, right? We're not going to tell them what to do. I think what's important is that we share all the input with them and give them our suggestions. And then hopefully working together, we're going to start to figure out the right way to deal with all of them. I see there's a question. I'll get to you in a minute, I promise. And then, so those 2 steps, we want to have those done by March 15th. That was kind of not only a sense of urgency that Councilor Krinsman brought up a minute ago, but you know, that's the starting point really for us to get back to the city council as a whole, make some decisions on what we're gonna be working on, how we're gonna prioritize them. So that's gonna be really important. Step 3, we launch them into what I'm gonna call the marketplace. We're gonna put the solutions out there, whether that's creating, however we create that sense of how city finances work. Let's get that out there. Let's see how people are engaging with it. And then in step 4, we get to the point where we see how we're doing, because we're measuring in step 3, how many people are downloading, looking, calling in, participating, you know, whatever those elements are going to be. And then in step 4, we continue that long-term engagement process of making sure that, you know, people know where these assets are, how they can ask questions, where we're posting FAQs, you know, whatever it is we are going to create as a group, that's where we start to iterate and improve on it. Again, I'm going to pause there because I said a lot of stuff. And again, draft. It's a well-informed draft, but there you have it. And now, Councillor Bixby.
Thanks. I think one thing I might figure out a place either in perhaps in number 2 to explicitly add would be to identify the other leaders and partners in the community. You know, I think that there's natural ones on the government side, but there are also, you know, many other stakeholders who, you know, perhaps engage with folks more directly than even we all do.
No, that's great. That's a great point. Councillor Krinsman.
Apologies if my dog crying next to me, because he can't be closer to me, gets in the way of my speech here. But I'm just wondering, actually more of a question. I'm wondering what you see as the output. If it's like a report that has a bulleted list of actions, if it's just a list of actions, like, you know, I could sort of see it being any or all, but I'm wondering what you see as the outcome of our work here.
Yeah, so I would think that in part will depend on how we are actually able to get out into the community, like what we decide. And I hope we're going to throw those ideas out on the table tonight here in a few minutes. How do we want to engage with the public? Is it, you know, I've started to poke around this just briefly. You know, we can set up email accounts that we can have people send their thoughts and comments into. We can create, you know, a survey-like questionnaire form for people to add their comments to. And I think both of those would probably lend themselves to some sort of a, you know, a readout, if you will, where we could perhaps not the same, but not entirely different to the process we went through for the zoning and planning work over the past couple of years, right? That where we're assembling things around themes, because at this point, I think everyone on this call has their, you know, 4 to 5 ideas around what those what some of the themes are going to be. And I know for a fact that, you know, or at least I hope, that we're going to hear some things that are new to all of us, that perhaps are absolutely positively worth effort and energy to sort out, but that we haven't thought of at the same time. So I'm kind of thinking,
maybe just a note of caution. We are still a government body, so while it's great to have a goal of solving problems, it's really much more of a comfortable space to claim that we've solved problems and take credit for things, rather than actually doing anything. So, but
okay, yeah, very well put. Very well put. Duly noted. Anything else from the committee here? All right. I see a hand up from Keith Bacon. If you've got a couple of comments, if you could just kind of let us know, like kind of focus for a couple of minutes, like take 2 minutes for us, because we do need to kind of keep time limited so that we can get to at least I have 3 very specific questions that I want to work with the committee on here tonight.
Sure, this is Keith Bacon. I'll stay on point. I'll be brief as well. I appreciate that you are taking the opportunity to be open-minded and reflecting about how to move us forward as a city. I think something like a group, like something called RWG, Residents Working Group. We need something like the PTO, but for the council of the city, where it's residents or maybe a select group of residents that work together to organize, to work with you, to explain from our point of view the issues as well. And you and your group work together to at least think about it, listen, ask more questions, do your own homework, and maybe act on these kind of things. Just an idea.
Nope, I like it. Thank you. Do you see that as maybe just kind of, this idea makes a lot of sense to me. Would you see that as a relatively large, small working group?
I'm not sure, but I know that during the last 2 weeks, the 11,000 residents that used the Newton Parents group on Facebook organized, talked, tried to figure out the best plan to move forward, to work not only with MPS, with the mayor, with the NTA. Not, obviously not blaming fingers. We just wanted people to come to resolutions as quickly as possible to get kids back in school. So I'm not sure, but I think that there's definitely, as a city as a whole, there's opportunity for a group like this, like a PTO, but for the city, where a group of people could have some, from our point of view, like myself, have comments, and instead of you're not inundated by thousands and thousands of emails, it could be like a group that kind of keeps the hands on the reins a little bit.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Martha?
Oh, I just, I appreciate the thoughts as well. And I think it's great to hear from folks. I just, it feels like we're already sort of on number one of one, and, just, we might want to pull back a minute, since I think we need to figure out exactly how we want to best gather community input before we start to create plans about groups and who it and how it comes in.
Yep. No, I would agree. I do think, and I did, I'm going to take that down. Right, that took that. Oh, Alan, go right ahead.
Just wanted to make one comment about city finances. I think we shouldn't make any assumptions about what people actually want to learn. We need to understand through this input, what people want to learn about city finances. And it seems to me what the focus should be on is on what are the numbers. It's less about what the numbers are than what the numbers reflect. What are the values? What are the priorities that the budget reflects? And that's an opportunity to engage people and educate them. I think people started to get into the nitty-gritty when we were talking about, how much free cash there is and other sources of revenue. But that was a reflection of what is the relative value of the teachers in the system. And I think that's what I think most people want to get to, although I'm not sure. I think we have to ask specific questions about what people are trying to learn through the financials.
Yep, perfect. Because I do think, and I did circulate 3 questions that I think are mission critical for us to kind of talk about as a group tonight. And these are, not in any particular order, but I'll start with the one, Alan, that you just hit on. What specific questions do we want people to, or what specific questions do we want to ask? In other words, what do we want to know from residents? And then, are there specific groups that we know we want to or need to hear from, and who are they? And then last, how do we want to gather this information, right? Josh touched on that a few minutes ago. You know, to me, that's a big determinant of what we actually bring to the full council on or about March 15th. So I don't know if anyone had any reactions to that.
So do you want to get into the questions that we're trying, do you want to now get into?
Yeah, like if you had, like, I already
Question.
like you just said, you know, one question we know we need to, or that we want to hear from people about is, what is it about city finances that, or what is it you need to know about city finances, you know, specifically and or in general? And we'll have to phrase that better. That's just off the cuff.
So I can jump in. One question is, I mean, the reason that we're even meeting is because, I think it was because of the strike in the fallout from that. So one question we could ask is, what are the lessons learned from our more recent experience?
I also think, yeah, not as it's a yes and, because I do think in this particular case, the flashpoint was, you know, around schools and in particular the strike. I think that what we're also trying to make sure that we're doing is we're putting forth materials that can help people kind of, you know, and I think Keith brought this up and he said it very well. How do we make sure that there's visibility, transparency, and understanding into what the council's doing on a regular basis? So that, you know, at any given time, you know, knock wood or you know, God forbid, there's another flashpoint, you know, so that people already know where to go to get a set of facts that can help them kind of, you know, from which they can launch an opinion, from which they can, you know, ask questions, as opposed to, you know, the, you know, $102 million of free cash, what kind of a starting point that we saw a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, sorry, man.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah, I like what Councilor Labovitz said, except I would like you do a yes and, which is not just what did you learn, but I think we need to be careful to not try and bring out teachers right, you know, students were this, city was wrong, mayor was this. That's not what we're interested in.
Right.
What we're interested in is, what did you learn about municipal finances that was of interest to you? What did you learn about the process? What did you learn about different responsibilities of different governing bodies that was of interest to you, that is compelling, that might need to change, that might open up avenues for your ongoing input, things like that, you know, sort of structural things and things that can help citizens stay engaged, as it were. So there was a lot of learning that went on during the process. I'm not interested in hearing what people learned about the strike in and of itself, like the offers that went back and forth, who was right, who was wrong, anything like that. I'm interested in hearing what people learned about the way the city works, the way the city operates, the responsibilities of different offices within the city, things like that.
I think that makes sense. Alan, does that resonate with you? I think you might be muted.
He's on mute. I'll translate. What he said was, yes, Councilor Krinsman is absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. That was, I'm pretty sure, that was reasonable.
Well then,
I think also what would you have liked to have known, and what would be helpful in the future to know?
agreed. Because I think it's the, what did you learn, find compelling, interesting, but and then were there things that you're still looking for an answer to? It might be the antithesis to that. I just want to make sure, there we go. Martha, haven't heard from Councilor Mickley yet either on this particular, if you will, call out or shout out there. But Martha?
Just to add in also, again, the role of sort of non-governmental pieces, perhaps what they would have hoped for from government, or what people learned about who's out there in the community and what they're offering as well.
Can you keep talking about that so I can, like,
Well, I'm thinking,
is it
the Boys and
other-
Girls Club that stepped up, and I think they got many new members during this time, and perhaps they could have had some more support. I don't really know. I mean, I know they had a list of things they needed from the community, like plastic forks to help feed kids. So some of those are kind of small, but just thinking about those entities that are out there in the community and do so much for folks that might have needed more from government. We could have helped communicate to them, that they were out there, and people just might have learned that they existed.
Yep. I also I think we're gonna get a fair amount of commentary kind of along a lot of different lines, like I mentioned before. I suspect that we know some of the things we're gonna hear, and I suspect there are gonna be things we've never thought of and we haven't heard yet. If I'm focusing our energy on what it is that our band of 24 counselors can focus on, I hear you, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how much, what are the themes around, we need this from the council, but we need this from who knows where, right? So I think that that's spot on. Councilor Mickley.
Yes, because you called on me, I won't stay silent. So thanks for calling me out. I'm still here. So I don't know if I'm getting off topic to what other people are raising, but at least I'll share my reflections coming into this conversation. Just looking at the agenda, to me, the primary focus is for now is to discuss the goals. What are our goals? And for me, I think our goals are twofold. One is to build knowledge, and the second is to build relationships. And on the first, on building knowledge, I think it's key that we build knowledge on city finances, we build knowledge on budgetary processes, but that we also build knowledge about what's going on in the schools, what's the situation every day for the teachers, what's the situation every day for the students. There were so many conversations that were eye-opening over the past 2 weeks, so we should have those opportunities in an ongoing way, not just today, not just over the next 2 weeks, but so that people are in touch with what's going on in our schools in general. But not just in our schools, also what's going on in our city. What are needs of our city? What are the needs of our different departments in our city? Department of Public Works, Parks and Rec. So I think part of this is knowledge building. And I think it's really important that we use both stats and anecdotes to share knowledge, to distribute knowledge. I was talking to Jane France earlier today about the work that we're setting on doing. Jane France, longtime Newton Public School educator. And she actually encouraged for us to bring in people from the Department of Public Works, commissioners, but also the workers that are out there every day, and have them share what their needs are. What equipment do they have? What equipment could they use? During the past 2 weeks, we were talking about numbers and layoffs, but imagine if we actually painted a picture of what the city does to run, what needs and services we currently deliver, and what things we don't currently deliver that we want to do, and we would do if we had more money. So it's all a budget, like Councilor Lobowitz was saying, is about priorities and it's about values, and to actually paint that picture in numbers, but also in perspectives from people at the front lines of all parts of our city, I think could be powerful in building knowledge. And on the part of relationship building, I mean, obviously relationships were damaged in many real ways across the city. And I think it's important that we build a way for us to communicate and be with each other better. And this might be going into a detailed point, but I think there's sort of two ways we can have these discussions. One is in Zoom and one is in person. I think there's a lot to be said for especially relationship building, to find opportunities to be together in person, to talk about these things in person. So we're not just learning about things with each other, but we're connecting and building relationships, and hopefully a better way of respecting and being engaged in civil discourse with each other while doing it. So I know that was all over the place, but some ideas that are top of mind.
No, and I think you just touched on an important one. Like, one of the thoughts and I completely agree with you about the knowledge and then, relationship building. Part of that has to be done in person. Right? So it's not just what do we want to know, but how do we want to go about gathering it, and how are we going to go through this process? Because I do know NPS has already started to engage third parties that they are at least considering, as far as I know, bringing into the city to kind of help facilitate a lot of conversations. And based on the way it was worded, my takeaway was that a lot of that would be in person. So that's good to know. But yeah, spot on. I agree. Like, are there other like comments or people thinking about? Oh, and I'm sorry, Mr. Bacon. Go ahead.
Yeah, real brief. I really like the direction of your conversation, John and David. This is really reassuring, is probably the best word. One thing that came up a lot the past 2 weeks, and this is just to add to what you're saying in that direction. People are asking something. This is just a raw, crude example, but people are asking, well, what happened to all this revenue from medicinal stores, and where is that all going? So this is part of that transparency, education, engagement of the finances and what is going on.
Okay. Good to know. Sorry, if you hear me kind of banging away on a keyboard, yes, I am an angry typer. I've been accused of that in the past. I'm just taking notes here.
Sure, it doesn't have to be that specific example, but just that's one example of the transparency. Like people are like, well, Newton's pulling in about 2 billion. I think I saw the number, something like that a year, and they were just curious, what's the general breakdown of something like that? Okay, this percent goes to school, this percent goes to X. It just something simple that we could have people point at. When you see one of those graphical financial charts, it shows like just a funnel of different funnels going to different areas, just to kind of a crude, easy thing that people can look at. Like, oh, okay, I understand.
Yep. No, that's good. And I think that what I'm also hearing there is make it visual. Make it. I tend to use words like chunkable, right? You've got to like be able to parse it out into, not just easy to understand, but easy to consume and understand, like, hey, am I spending, like, is this going to lead me to the kind of answer or information I need to know? Or am I going down the wrong path? All right. And then Councilor Krinsman, is your hand just up or got something else?
Quickly, just wanted to add that a component of our charge has to do with building back the trust with the people. We haven't talked about that too much. And I think one of the ways to start that probing in that conversation is to maybe get people to share with us who they already trust or who they felt they could trust during this process, and more importantly, why. And I think if we can leverage sources that are already deemed trustworthy, I think that's helpful in terms of building the trust and expanding the trust, both from existing either government bodies or other individuals around in the community, but also towards the government, the municipal government at large.
I like that a lot. And what I wrote down is, who or where did you turn for information, during this last, during the strike? I'm just going to say it that way. Who did you turn to? Where did you go to look for information? And then maybe a little bit
and why.
Of why. Exactly. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. David?
I'm just clapping and the thing wouldn't go away.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'll stop
Clap.
calling you out then. Awesome. So
should we talk about?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just the piece about how we hear from people.
I was just going to say, let's kind of jump to some of the other topics. I love that, I'm right there with you. It's like, groups we want to interact with and how we want to interact with them. Is it, do we just do like a shotgun approach and say, hey, you can email us, you can call us, you can fill out this, a questionnaire kind of, survey-like thing where we, that we can utilize Google to do, do we set up, in-person sessions? Maybe we can, grab the chamber for a night or 2 or 3 or 10 and literally in person, right, have that conversation. Do we do all of that and more different? Like, do we have thoughts on that? Alan's got his hand up. I didn't know, Martha, if you wanted to give us some inspiration there.
I mean, I think to the extent possible, doing a little bit of both is probably the way to go. I mean, I think making sure that we are available to hear input coming in, but also that we're explicitly sourcing it, and reaching out to people that we, feel either represent groups or, that we wouldn't hear from otherwise, just by being out there. I do like the idea of doing some sort of public hearing or listening session or something, especially if it has some pretty clear sort of reasons and, areas that we think would be most helpful to hear. And, I do think surveys can be helpful, but I think having a deliberate list of folks that we think we should talk to, and perhaps splitting it up among this group, or if there are other counselors or others who would want to help, could get us
Great.
close to
And
where we want to be.
who, like, I have my idea, my thoughts, but who do you think some of those, groups might be?
I mean, I have a list that I've been trying to compile over the last little bit. I'm interested to hear from my colleagues. I think as Mr. Bacon's been referring to, Facebook was a spot that people were gathering and sharing information and going line by line through the city budget and all of that. I think it'd be very interesting to talk to Facebook group moderators and see how they approach things, if they're willing to share that kind of thing. I think the PTOs, and parents in school communities who maybe aren't as active in the PTOs, but were active during this time, would be helpful to hear from. I think obviously teachers and staff and students should be forefront, as well as families, and explicitly looking at, families who are perhaps not Newton residents, and families who might have had a variety of experiences throughout this time. I also think it would be interesting to talk to our state level representatives about some of the constraints that, and pieces of this that are not just Newton budget based. And I think that was part of my list right now. I'm sure I have others.
Nope, appreciate that. Council Lebovitz?
So, I mean, it sounds like this is going to be a tremendous amount of work, and I'm concerned about that. Who?
Well, I was told that that's what you signed up for. No, not true.
I don't mean this group. I mean the follow-up.
Well,
Who's going to do?
I do think, I think that there is a significant amount of work that, is warranted for sure. And I do think that, it's only granted, I think I only used one word to describe it, but we are going to have to prioritize. There's no question in my mind. How we arrive at those priorities, we can also discuss, in the near future, but, we'll have to pick the top 3, 5, whatever, for the city council to tackle. But I agree. And I think that that's one of the, we can do the traditional, what do we think is gonna, again, going back to if there are 6 themes, and the city council is gonna tackle 4 of them, how do we rate each one on, our best guess as to how much impact it's gonna have versus how much effort it's gonna take to get it done? And we're gonna have to create a balance there, without a doubt. But no, I think
my other point was looking at ourselves, looking at the city council itself. And are we, I mean, I know that our meetings are open and all that, but do people understand our role? And through the strike, it seemed like there was a lot of confusion about what our role was. And I think we have to, I mean, we'll find out what people say, but I think one of the questions should be, do you understand the role of the city council? How can the city council be more, open and communicative? It's not just having our meetings open, but do people understand what we're doing? What our priorities are right now? What are we focused on? It seems like there's a tremendous amount of information out there, but it can also be very confusing. So
Yep, I would agree with
I
that.
think we have to think about ourselves and
Yep.
how we function and whether
I agree.
we're clear about that with people.
Thank you. I agree with that. Josh?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a chicken and egg, but I think it's important, which is I do think we need to give some thought to the output at the end of this here. And I say that because I think it's fair for us to give notice to people if they're providing input, how that may or may not show up in the end. And what I mean by that is, are we going to provide a copy of every email that we received? Are we going to list a bunch of names, people that we got input from? What does that output look like? Again, just so that we can give sufficient notice to individuals who may or may not want to contribute to that, who may be more or less interested based on what that final product looks like. And maybe it's not, a final determination, but at least our inclination of what we plan to do. But I think it's only fair to provide that to individuals from whom we solicit input.
Yeah, other than anonymous though, do you think, or anonymity, are there other factors or facets that you're thinking of? Because I think that's a great point.
I would think that some people may participate differently if their email is going to be published versus if their name is going to show up that they sent an email versus if, the Mason Rice PTO is going to show up. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But, they're just sort of all ways of us showing in the end, because I do think it's important for us to show the breadth of the information from whom or the breadth of sources from whom we received information. I think that lends more credibility to whatever it is that we do and the recommendations we come up with.
Yep.
But I also want to preserve I want to make sure that people are free to participate openly, truthfully, and as honestly as the process allows them to.
I love it. Well put. Okay. So I do want to shine a little bit of a brighter light on how we want to go about gathering info over, between now and, theoretically anyway, March 15th, our due date. I kind of wrote down a mixture of in-person versus, digital channels. And then we can kind of, see what kind of feedback we're getting. Josh, to your point, we're going to have to help people understand, hey, here's how we hope to use your input, or intend to use your input, right? Whether we're going to share names, which I don't think is necessary, but, maybe there are categories, right, that, that we can use to qualify, not qualify, wrong word, to kind of group, parent, teacher, educator, student, resident, and I can think of probably a dozen other different dimensions, but how do we want to capture that info? And does anyone else have any other kind of thoughts? Because I've heard like I said, in-person and digital, email, maybe there's a questionnaire, maybe some of the folks are on the phones, doing some more kind of in-depth conversations with specific individuals. Anything else out there that we should be considering, do you think? Oh, okay. And again, we don't have to have the final list tonight. I'm just thinking, from here, we're gonna have to pivot pretty quickly into action. So getting some of these things set up, communicated, I think that's, part and parcel of, how do we want to gather information? Like I see several folks, from the public here on the call, and looks like a couple have dropped off. I'll take that personally later, but I do want to make sure that we're going far and wide with our ask. I want to make sure everybody in the city knows we're looking for everyone's thoughts here. And I'm also kind of looking at the clock. I think an hour's session is probably appropriate. So at that point, I've got my 3 questions out there. I don't see any more hands. Is there anything else on the committee's mind that we want to kind of pull into the conversation that I haven't touched on already? Yeah, please.
Go for it.
I see Mickley's got his hand up. Go ahead, Mickley. I've
You were
spoken a lot today.
first. You beat me by like half a second.
Fair enough. I'll just then renew what I said to you once privately, which is I would love for us to even start by having a public comment session. I'd love to hear from people, anyone and everyone. What are your thoughts either about, the process of the questions we've asked, or about us and what we're doing, and what, recommendations for us, what we're about to do, what we are doing, how we're doing it, and what it should look like in the end. I'm sort of open to any and all of it, but I'd love to hear from people as we get started.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Having the public early involved in this will make sure that not only we're doing it right, but also that is literally part of the work. And I think opening the chambers to public comment could be a great first step, right? Using what resources we have as city councilors and bringing people together. Obviously, people can be in person or virtual, but it at least offers both. And also just as tangible next steps. I don't know if this is running too fast, but just with March 15th around the corner, I think it could be interesting for us to brainstorm on ideas of what recommendations might look like. And those could just be first iterations that we knock off and change. But, as a potential agenda item for the next meeting, even for people to think on their own and put forward things that we could share. I don't know if we can do that over email or not, but at least to have stuff to talk about that are somewhat more concrete in terms of, here's an example of a plan, what's good, what's bad about it.
Awesome. Councilor Bixby.
Thank you, working group chair, Oliver.
It just dawned on me, I'm using everyone's first name, and I apologize for the informality, but
all good.
that's kind of
I think, I also like the idea of that public comment. I do wonder, to the extent it's helpful to do a very brief sort of level setting of information at the beginning in some way. Just again, as this come up from Councilor Lovovitz and others, just some very basics about the city council and our role, and also a little bit about sort of what we're looking for with this group, I think could be helpful at the beginning of that. And I would encourage us, if we're thinking about doing some sort of questionnaire survey, to have that ready at that time, as if people can't attend, so then they can fill out the survey at that moment.
agreed. And I think one of the questions that I had posed this afternoon has to do with exactly the timing of when we might be, I think Councilor Krinsman mentioned to me the other day, we don't need 2 weeks notice for public comment. But I do wonder, to Councilor Bixby's point, how long do we really need to get ourselves ready for a potential full chamber, experience? Might be a driving force there. What do we prepare walking into that room, right? Certainly our sense of what we're after, right? So that we can convey that confidently to the public. I think we've kind of outlined, or we've talked about some of the go, no-go zones, right? We're not looking in for finger pointing. We're not looking for anyone to assign blame. We're looking to the informational needs. What was your experience? How do we move forward? how do we help? What specifically can we do? Might be a way to phrase it. What specifically can we, your city council, do to help be as transparent as you want us to be? Because it felt to me like there was a lot of questions around, and I think we've heard it tonight. What is it you do? Why are you here? Type of thing. And what's the school committee do versus the city council? And like things of that nature, I think are important to create some content, right? Some knowledge around that people can find and absorb in a way that's useful and meaningful to them. Counselor Lovovitz, I see your hand up.
So somebody mentioned the idea of actually interviewing people. I think we have to think about that. But I think it is important to get specific input from, I'm going to just call them thought leaders, whether they're official or, as Councillor Bixby mentioned, community activists. We might want to ask them for specific input because they are sort of key communicators and receivers of information in the community. So it's just a thought or a suggestion, I should say.
Fabulous. So I think just kind of keeping an eyeball on the 8 o'clock bogey I kind of had set up here. Just really quickly, a couple of next steps. We will, Clerk Matthews and I will go through this process of assembling our notes. I've got a pretty good list. I'm sure he does as well. Obviously, we have this recording. We'll assemble that, get that ready to be shared out. I do think that, a couple of next steps here is to see determine the lead time for the possibility of when we might be able to access the chambers. What sort of notice do we think is A, required, and B, appropriate given what we are going to want to prepare before we come into that room? In other words, what are we really, how do we want to help people understand the kind of input we're looking for? I think is really important. I think that I'll take the to-do on kind of working with City Hall, people at City Hall on creating an email account, talking to them about getting a Google form set up. Again, it's kind of let's have these things ready, and then we'll determine, over the course of the next, few days, how we will get it out there and see how people are reacting, so that when we get into the kickoff part of it, we can make a lot of adjustments, but and completely kind of overhaul what it is we're doing, because I really appreciate the idea of kind of getting feedback, not only in terms of having people react or comment on our questions, but the process we're going through and some things that we haven't thought of to this point.
Did we talk about a timeline? I mean, I think we need to put a tentative timeline on this, including our own meetings, because I think most of us would want to know, at least tentatively when we're going to meet again between now and March 15th.
Yep, I think that's a good point. Any thoughts on that before I continue my opining? Anybody? How frequently should we meet? Because I do like that one. Do we want to, does weekly make sense, at least at the onset, so that we can kind of get our ducks in a row and keep things moving along?
Yeah.
Yeah, weekly's okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, working group chair Oliver. I think yeah, it's a nice full title. Yeah, I think if we're trying to do a public meeting early and soon, I think we should do weekly as we build up to that. Because I like the idea of having that before our March 15th recommendations are even due.
Yeah. Any other counselors' comments on that? Does that make sense? Thumbs up, all in? Heck no, you're crazy?
I think that works. I mean, I think we'd probably be looking at the last week of February to try and do the public comment hearing thing potentially, right?
Probably, yes.
So we might want to even just put a super tentative hold on a,
Well, yeah, then that's, I will be on that in the morning, for sure.
yeah.
All right, any parting thoughts? All right, I'll be working to get us together sometime next week. Is Thursday next week? Wait. Thursday next week, we've got, I don't know. I think there's something going on next Thursday, right?
Well, there was talk there was going to be the school committee, but I don't think that's happening next Thursday now. So let me talk to Cassidy in the morning, but I
think there's a zoning and
That's
planning.
Monday, right?
I think zoning
Oh
and
yeah,
planning
zoning
got
and planning.
rescheduled.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. Yes.
Got it. Okay, what about Tuesday? How are people on Tuesday next week?
I don't have land use, so
Right, I was gonna say land use is this week, so,
I can't.
Cannot? okay. All right, well, we don't have to do that here. We'll send a poll out, figure out what'll make sense for folks next week.
Does
We'll
it have
get
to
it on
be
the
in the
calendar.
does it have to be in the evening?
Um,
Or we seem
Doesn't
to be
have to be.
focusing on the evenings.
I work during the day.
That's-
It's harder for me.
yeah. The day job, folks.
Okay, I'm just asking.
And like an actual job, not a consultant.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Totally fair point.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's unfortunately incredibly true. Yeah, no, that's fair. All right, so we'll get that on the books. I'll start chasing down what would be a good night to kind of get, secure the chambers if we're gonna do this. That phrase sounds really awkward out of context, but see when we might be able to get together for, public comment session. Because yeah, when are we on with the school committee? Is that?
Monday, right?
Yeah.
Yep, Monday.
All right, so that is inked for Monday now. The 12th,
Mhm.
right?
Yep, Monday, 12 at 7 PM.
Got it. And then. Oh, that was the meeting with the mayor. That's right. Okay. I'm gonna stop talking because now I'm just thinking out loud. Not a good look for me. Well, there you go. Anybody else? Last thoughts?
Just thank you, John, for taking the lead on. Counselor Oliver for taking the lead on.
Just John works for you. That's great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
thanks for the folks from the public who joined us. If you have any other thoughts for us, please do share them with us. I'm pretty sure that everyone here, all the names I'm very familiar with, I know that you know our email addresses. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Matthews, for all your support here. And I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Good night,
Do I need a
everybody.
motion to adjourn? Do we want to be formal like that?
You want a working motion to adjourn?
Sure.
A working motion to adjourn.
Nice.
Got it.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Take care.
I second it.
All